Triggers. Triggers are also one of the database objects which are used to automate the database or to automate the query. Triggers are used to automate the query. Used to automate the query. Triggers are used to automate the query, which means we need not to execute triggers. No need of executing triggers. If we create one trigger once, it will get executes automatically every time. We have to tell it when to execute the trigger. That's all. It will execute automatically whenever that scenario comes. Trigger will get executed automatically. Automatically. No need of manual execution. Like stored procedures, for stored procedure, we need to click on the thunder button and we have to give input and we have to execute the stored procedure, right? View also we have to execute. Select star from view name. Like that, we need not to execute triggers manually. No need of manual execution. And trigger also will not return any output. It will not print any output in the result set. It will work only in the backend as a program. It will not print any result set. It will not print any result set. Any result set. It will not print any result set. No result will be displayed in the output even after execution of trigger. We will not execute it manually. Even if it is executing in backend, it will not print any results. Yeah, similar to index, but in index is a performance increment method. It is not like that. It is just used to make the database automated. For example, we have no. For example, we have two tables here, which are called account details and transaction details. Account details and transaction details. We have two tables called account details and transaction details. What are the columns that we have in account details table? Account ID, name, age, location, or let us take account type or current balance. Account type, current balance. Account type also I am removing, not required for this trigger. And what are the columns that I have in transaction details? Transaction ID, account ID, which is a foreign key of account details table to find who did that particular transaction. Transaction type, transaction amount, and transaction time. These are the columns that we have in transaction detail. This transaction time we will print by using the function called now_of. We'll print date and time automatically. Forget about it. Let us think we have remaining columns. Let us think I have only one customer and there is only one account created. Account ID 1, name Ram, age 21. By default, current balance is 0. Let us think. After he created one account and we are storing his details in account details table. We have only one customer. he did one particular transaction. Transaction ID 1, which is done by account ID 1. Transaction type is credit. Transaction type is credit. Transaction amount is 1000. Let us think these are the things. Now, transaction time by using now of, we printed that particular current data. Now, what should be his balance? He did 1000 rupees credit or 1000 rupees deposit. What should be his balance now? 1000. He did one more transaction, which is done by account ID 1, debit of 500. What should be his balance now? He did debit of 500. His balance should be 500. His balance should be 500. Who will change this balance in our bank? For example, if we are doing any transaction, immediately balance is getting changed, right? Who is changing it? Automatically it is changing, right? Trigger is used to automate that particular query. Trigger is used to automate that particular query. To do anything automatically in database, we have to use something called triggers. Triggers will change this balance automatically. But when it comes to triggers, these will keep on running in the backend whenever we are doing any transaction. I already told you, in India itself, per day 50 crore transactions will occur. For all those 50 crore transactions, triggers will be keep on executing in backend. That's why they will make our database server slow. Without triggers, we can't achieve this process. We don't have any other option. If we use triggers, our database servers will become little bit slow because they will keep on running in the backend. They will keep on updating values from one table to another table. Now, in these triggers, I have two scenarios, or I have two types. They are called two times to execute the query. Two types. Based on these two scenarios, we will execute the query of the trigger because we will not execute it manually. We have to tell when should this trigger will get executed. Time of execution of trigger. Time of execution. Time of execution. And we have one more thing called cost of execution. Cost of execution. Execution. This trigger will get executed. This trigger will get executed. Time will be before trigger or after trigger. Before or after. Time will be before or after. Time. Before trigger or after trigger. Two times will be there. Before or after. Two types. When should you execute the trigger? Before this particular thing, before this particular cost, or after this particular cost. And cause of execution, we have all DML commands. Insert, update, or delete. Insert or update or delete. We have time of execution and cause of execution. Two things. For example, here what we are doing, whenever some transaction occurs, we are inserting data into transaction details. whenever we insert any data into transaction details, cause is insert. Whenever we are inserting any data into transaction details, we have to execute this trigger. Why this before and after will work means? First, if you are crediting some amount into your bank, before you credit, will it reflect in your bank? No, only after you credit amount successfully, it will reflect in your bank, right? This is the time of action. Only after inserting into transaction details successfully, then update the balance in account details. Okay. These are time of execution and cost of execution. We will have purpose for before also. In next trigger, we will discuss about before trigger also. Both triggers we will try. The syntax for creating a trigger is create trigger, create trigger, trigger name. For creating any database object, we have a command called create. For creating view, create view, view name. For creating procedure, create procedure, procedure name. For creating trigger also, create the trigger name. Trigger name. After that, we have to mention on which table we are writing trigger. On transaction details table. If I am doing any changes on transaction details table, this trigger, sorry, one minute. Create trigger name before or after. First, we have to mention time of action and cause of action. Before or after. Insert or update or delete. Before or after, we can mention any time based on our requirement, and we have to mention insert or update or delete. What is the cause of execution of on transaction details? We are writing trigger on transaction details table. Whenever we did any insert, update, or delete in transaction details table, this trigger should get executed automatically. We will not execute it manually. And we have to mention for each row. For each row. Each row. Which means if you insert each and every row, while you are inserting each and every row, this trigger should get fired automatically. For inserting every new row. If you are inserting 1000 rows, for all 1000 rows, this trigger should fire automatically. For example, if you are doing transactions, for every transaction, trigger will fire automatically, right? For some transactions also, it will not avoid. For every transaction, it will fire automatically. For every transaction, it should reflect in current balance. For each and every row, this trigger should fire. This is the syntax to tell SQL when should this trigger get fired. This is to create, and this is tell SQL when should you execute the trigger automatically. Before or after inserting on transaction details for each and every row. You are inserting each row in transaction details. For every row, you have to execute this trigger. After that, we will have begin and end. Begin and end. Yeah, multiple users. For all users, it will update. Yeah. We have to write begin and end. In between this begin and end, we have to write the whole query. We have to write the query of trigger. Query of trigger. Yeah. Complete trigger will end by here. Now, what is the first thing here? My logic is I want to find the latest transaction ID. latest transaction ID. Latest transaction ID. Latest transaction ID. By using this particular thing called latest transaction ID, I can do anything. For example, if you do one transaction, your transaction ID will be the latest transaction in your database. If I have this latest transaction ID, by using that transaction ID, I will do remaining process. Any one of you tell me the logic to find the latest transaction. Tell me the logic to find latest transaction ID. Tell me a logic to find latest transaction ID. All of you open your bench and open Besant Bank and execute select star from transaction details. What is the latest transaction ID here? See at my screen. Query not says select star from transaction. Here output we cannot do. How to find the latest transaction ID? What is the latest transaction ID here? Latest transaction ID. If I did one more transaction, what will be its transaction ID? Fifth transaction. What is the latest transaction? If I do one more transaction, what will be the latest transaction? Fifth one is the latest transaction. Now what is the latest transaction? 4. Indirectly, we can tell it as maximum of transaction ID is called latest transaction. 4 is the maximum value among all this value, right? Even if I do one more transaction, it will be transaction ID number 5. 5 is the latest transaction, which will be maximum value among first 5. If I am doing next transaction also, it will become 6. Transaction ID will become 6. It is the maximum value. Indirectly, we can say it as maximum transaction ID is the latest transaction. Maximum transaction ID is the latest transaction ID. Before doing this, all of you click on any stored procedure and copy the stored procedure code. Copy the stored procedure code and try to paste it in normal page, normal query page. Try to paste that stored procedure code in normal page. You will get lot of into marks or errors. You will get lot of into marks or errors. Same stored procedure code, which is correct, which we written in stored procedure page, copy that code and paste it in normal page. Paste it in normal SQL page. See how many errors we are getting. Why do we get this particular errors? Can anyone tell what is the reason of this particular error? Same stored procedure code only, right? There I executed the stored procedure and it is successfully working. Same code I copied to here. Stored procedure also need to execute it. It is also a SQL program. The reason is stored procedure can store multiple queries. Here it is storing multiple queries. If we are writing any query in SQL, what will be the end of the query? At the end, what will be keep for each query? Semicolon. We use semicolon. Here we are using semicolon after completion of every query. After first semicolon itself, SQL will think that query got completed. After first semicolon itself, SQL will think that query got completed. Because we are using semicolon as delimiter or separator for each and every query. Here, from here, we are creating stored procedure. For here itself, it will think that query got completed. But it is not completed. To here, the same stored procedure query. But SQL is assuming that after every semicolon, query got completed. The next thing is a new query. But we should not do that particular thing. To change the delimiter, here we are using semicolon as delimiter. Instead of that, if we change delimiter, it will not consider semicolon as the end of the query. Let us try to change the delimiter. Delimiter and give some symbols instead of semicolon. I change delimiter to $. Whenever I give $, then only it will consider that query got executed successfully. No need to execute this particular line, but write delimiter $, or any other symbols also. Give double symbols. Now, no into markup, no syntax error. Because SQL is thinking that query not ended yet. Only if we give $, at the end of the query, then only it will think that query got completed. Now I am using semicolon. Semicolon is not the delimiter. It is not the separator for each and every query. It is not thinking that query got completed. If we don't use delimiter as semicolon, sorry, this $, it will give all errors again. We are just changing the separator between each and every query. We need not to execute this delimiter also. Now for trigger also, here we don't have any new page. We don't have any new page to execute the trigger. Do we have any new page here? Like for creating stored procedure, we click here and we click on create stored procedure and we went to new page and we write the query. For trigger, we don't have any such option. We have only table, view, stored procedure and functions. For triggers, we don't have any such option. We can get that option, but we need to change a lot of settings and all. It will be a very difficult process. That's why it is better to learn how to write stored procedure and triggers in normal page also. In normal page also we can write stored procedure and triggers, but we need to change delimiter. Every time we need to change delimiter. One more line will be added to the query. Okay, I am removing this stored procedure code and let us write our trigger query. First, we have to change delimiter to $. After that, let us write the query from beginning. What is the syntax for creating trigger? Create trigger. Create trigger. Trigger name is balance updating because it will update balance automatically. Balance updater. Create trigger balance updater. After insert, after inserting any value on transaction details. After insert on transaction details, after insert on transaction details, after insert on transaction details, for each row, for each row, for each row, for each and every row, this trigger should get executed automatically. After that, we have to write begin and end. In between this begin and end, this is the overall syntax for trigger. Out without logics, empty syntax for trigger. Here we didn't write any workability or logics inside the trigger. No query inside the trigger. This is called a empty trigger. Before writing query inside the trigger, all of you truncate your transaction details table. What will happen if you truncate transaction details table? All values will be removed. Structure will be empty. All values will be removed. I don't want to see the structure. I don't want any values in the transaction details table because before that I didn't updated those transactions. I will remove all the transactions, truncate table, transaction details. Truncate table, transaction details. After that, click on execute. Transaction details table will be removed. Sorry, the data present in the transaction tables will be removed. Transaction details table is empty now. Now, what will I do means I will write one more query to update current balance of everyone to 0. By default, current balance of every account holder will be 0. For doing no transactions occurred here. They just created their accounts. Current balance of everyone is 0. After that, we will write this trigger. After this trigger, if we insert any value into transaction details, it should get reflected in account details table also. If we insert any transaction details table, it should reflect in account details table. Update account details. Set current balance equal to 0. Update account details, set current balance equal to 0. For everyone, that's why we are not writing anywhere. For everyone, I want to update the current balance to 0. You are using safe update mode. I am shifting from one database to another database. That's why I got. You might not get this particular error. I updated current balance of everyone to 0. If I execute select star from account details, for every person, current balance is 0 now. They are just fresh accounts. They didn't did any transactions. They did any transactions, I will store in transaction details table and it will get reflected in account details table. Current balance of every person is 0 now. Now, what is the first logic that I told in trigger in between begin and end? First, we want to find the latest transaction ID. What is the logic? Maximum of transaction ID is the latest transaction. Because for trigger, we cannot give any input and it will not give any outputs. For trigger, we will not give any input and it will not return any output. Select max of transaction ID from transaction details. From transaction details. Select max of transaction ID from transaction. What will it return? What will this query return? It will return the latest transaction ID. Select max of transaction ID from transaction. It will return the latest transaction. Now I don't have any transactions. If I execute this query, before this I have 4 transactions. Before truncating the table, I have 4 transactions. If I use max of transaction ID, what will it do? It will give maximum transaction ID now. What is the maximum value in transaction ID column? 4. If I have 4 values, 4 is the maximum. Like this, it will give max of transaction ID, which is the latest transaction ID. Maximum of transaction ID itself is the latest transaction. Now, what I want to do is, I want to store the output of this query in a variable because trigger will not print any value in the output. You just write some select query, trigger will throw you error. You should not print any output. Now, I want to store this output into a variable. I want to pass the output of this select query into variable. I will declare one variable. Declare variable underscore latest transaction ID. Declare variable underscore latest transaction ID. Declare variable underscore latest transaction ID. integer. Declare variable underscore latest transaction ID integer. What can a variable do? Variable will store the output of a select query, but it can store only single value. Variable can store only single value. Both variable and parameter can store only single values. But variable will store the output of select query. Where for parameter we will give value as input. Variable will store the output of a select query. Select max of transaction ID into variable underscore latest transaction ID. I am passing the output of this select query into the corresponding variable. I am passing the output of this select query into corresponding variable. Now I have latest transaction ID here. Now I have latest transaction ID. Now I know the value of latest transaction. By using this latest transaction ID, can I find the account ID of the person who did that particular latest transaction? Yeah, it is present in a transaction details table also, right? Can I find the account ID of the person who did latest transaction? I want to find only the account ID. For that, I will write the query. Select account ID, comma. I want remaining content also. I want complete details of transaction. Account ID, transaction type, and transaction type. Sorry, no need of transaction type. Transaction amount. Transaction amount from transaction details. From transaction details. Select account ID, transaction type, transaction amount from transaction details. Where transaction ID equal to variable underscore latest transaction ID. I am finding the account ID, transaction type, and transaction amount of the person who did latest transaction. I am storing this max of transaction in a variable called latest transaction ID. And by using this latest transaction ID, I am printing his account ID, transaction type, and transaction amount. Now, what I want to do means, I want to store. I'm writing the same query in multiple lines. No problem. I want to store this account ID, transaction type, and transaction amount into their corresponding variables. I want to declare few more variables, and I want to pass account ID, transaction type, and transaction amount into those variables. Because trigger will not print any output. That's why what I will do, declare variable underscore account ID integer. Account ID integer. So that declare variable underscore transaction type var of 10. Var of 10. After that, declare variable underscore transaction amount. Transaction amount is also integer. Transaction amount. declare variable underscore transaction amount integer. After that, I will pass these outputs into corresponding variables. I will pass account ID into variable underscore account ID, transaction type into variable underscore transaction type, and transaction amount into variable underscore transaction amount. I will pass these outputs into corresponding variables. First we have to give columns in the same order. First we give account ID, that's why variable underscore account ID. After that, transaction type, variable underscore transaction type. After that, transaction amount, variable underscore transaction amount. Select account ID, transaction type, transaction amount into variable underscore account ID, variable underscore transaction type, and variable underscore transaction. I am passing these outputs into corresponding variables. Now we have latest transaction ID and his account ID, his transaction type, and transaction amount. I have all these four details now. I am storing all these four outputs in corresponding variables. I have latest transaction ID. I have the account ID of the person who did latest transaction. I have transaction type, and I also have the transaction amount. I have all these details. I have all these details. Now, by using them, I want to write the logic. By using them, I want to write the logic. What I want to do? I want to write if-else conditions. If transaction type, which means variable underscore transaction type. If variable underscore transaction type is equal to credit, if variable underscore transaction type is equal to credit, if the person is creating the amount into the bank, what we want to do? We want to add the amount. Credit, then update account details. Update account details table. Set current balance is equal to I want to update current balance only, right? I want to change current balance only. Update account details, set current balance is equal to current balance plus variable underscore transaction amount. I am storing his transaction amount in variable. I want to add this to current balance. Current balance is equal to existing balance plus amount. For example, if your balance is 2 lakhs, your already existing balance is 2 lakhs. If you credit 10 more thousand, if you credit 10,000 into bank, what should be your balance? 2 lakhs plus 10,000. It should not become 10,000. If you give where current balance is set current balance is equal to transaction amount, it will become only 10,000. You should not do like that. You have to add 10,000 to existing 2 lakhs. That current balance is equal to already existing current balance plus this transaction. Where account ID equal to variable underscore account ID. I am storing this account ID in the variable. The person who did transaction, I am storing his account ID in variable. I will give that variable. If transaction type is equal to credit, I am doing this particular process. Else, if transaction type is not credit, else, what we want to do? We want to update account details again. If transaction type is not credit, means it will be debit. Transaction type is not credit, means it will be debit. What should we do if it is debit? We have to subtract. Else, update account details, set current balance is equal to current balance minus variable underscore transaction amount where account ID is equal to variable underscore account ID. Same query. At the end, write end if and give semicolon. This is the basic query. We completed half portion of the query. Half of the query got completed. I will share the meeting link once again. Please join in the meeting back. People in online, I will share one more meeting link. Meeting time got completed. Join one more time.
Yeah, sure.
All of you select all this trigger query, select trigger query and click on thunder button just above it to execute. Click on thunder button above. Trigger is created successfully. Select this whole trigger query and click on thunder button which is present above. Safe update mode. Execute set SQL safe updates is equal to 0. After that, execute the trigger. After completing your trigger query, don't forget to change your delimiter back to semicolon. Right? Delimiter and use semicolon. Trigger is completed. After that, you have to change back your delimiter to semicolon. After completing every query, we have to give semicolon only, right? We will change our delimiter back to semicolon. After that, set SQL underscore safe underscore updates is equal to 0. Safe underscore updates equal to 0. Trigger is executed successfully. After that, change the delimiter. Now insert any value into transaction updates. Save. After save, no special here. After save, no space. And also updates. Yes. After delimiter, insert into transaction details. Insert one record into transaction details. If any person did any transaction, it will be inserted into transaction details. Write insert query. Insert into transaction details. Transaction details. Transaction details. Values. For transaction details table, we need not to insert values for all the columns because transaction ID is auto generated. Transaction ID we give auto increment, it will be auto generated. Transaction time we give now off. For remaining columns only we have to give values which are account ID, transaction type, and transaction amount. Transaction amount. For these columns only, I have to give values. Insert into transaction details, account ID, transaction type, and transaction amount, and give values for them. I'm mentioning that account ID, one person is doing some transaction, and he is doing transaction called credit, and his transaction amount is 1,000 rupees. Account ID one person doing transaction. He is doing transaction type as credit, and he is doing the credit of 1,000 rupees. If I execute this particular query, some spelling mistake is there. Will trigger I did some spelling mistake. transaction details, where transaction details. I did some mistake in trigger. That's why I have to drop the trigger. To drop or to remove the trigger, we have query called drop trigger name, which is balance updater. We have to check spellings clearly. Transaction details. Is there any other spelling mistakes? Now I will execute this trigger query once again. We have to include delimiter also while executing the trigger. Trigger executed successfully. Now I will insert some value into transaction details table. Transaction ID. Somewhere I misspelled transaction ID. What is the column name here in transaction details table? Is it transaction ID? Select star from transaction detail. In table itself, I give transaction ID. We have to check the column names very clearly. Otherwise, it will throw us error. The spellings are most important thing in SQL. We have to give accurate spellings. Yeah, now inserted successfully into transaction details. I inserted one record into transaction details. Table. Now what should happen? I did create of 1,000 rupees. If I execute select star from transaction details, from transaction details, I have one transaction. One transaction is created here. Transaction ID number 3, account ID 1, transaction type credit, transaction amount, and transaction time. Successfully one transaction is created. Now where should it reflect? I did credit of 1,000 rupees. What should happen after doing credit? It will add to current balance. If I execute select star from account details, account details, see the current balance of account ID 1. It is changing automatically or what? It is changing. I will insert one more transaction. Let us think this account ID 1 person did debit of 500. Transaction type is debit. He did debit of 500 rupees. What should be the current balance after that? He did credit of 1,000 rupees. His balance is 1,000. If he did debit 500 again, what should be his balance? 500. I am inserting into transaction details table. If I execute select star from transaction details, one more transaction occurred. This is debit 500 rupees. If I execute select star from account details, see his current balance 500. For example, one more transaction occurred, which is done by account ID number 2. Account ID number 2. He did credit here. She did credit of 500 rupees. Account ID 2%. Her current balance is 0 now. Account ID 2% is Sana. Her current balance is 0 now. If she did credit of 500 rupees, what should be her balance? 500. I am inserting into transaction details. If I execute select star from account details, check the current balance of Sana. But this query is wrong. This trigger is wrong. Why? Because balance of John is 0. John's balance is 0. If he did, what is the account ID of John? 3. Account ID is 3. If he did debit of 500 rupees, debit of 500 rupees, see what will happen. It is executed successfully. If you execute select star from account details, what is the balance? Minus 500. Will your bank give like that? If your balance is 0, are you able to withdraw again? Any amount again? No. But this trigger is accepting. If it accepts like that, I will withdraw 100 crores and I will jump to other countries. We can buy separate island. It should not do like that, right? We have to check that always whenever we are doing debit, whenever we are withdrawing the amount, our transaction amount should be less than current balance. Whenever I am doing debit, my transaction amount should be, whatever the amount I am withdrawing, should be less than the current balance. Less than or equal to current balance. For example, my current balance is 1000 rupees. In my account, my current balance is 1000 rupees. How much amount can I withdraw from my bank? My balance is 1000. I have 1000 rupees in my bank. How much amount can I withdraw from the bank? Anything which is less than or equal to 1000. I can withdraw 200, 300, 400, 500, whatever the amount, which is less than or equal to 1000. I cannot withdraw any amount which is greater than 1000. I cannot withdraw any amount which is greater than 1000. If I try to withdraw, bank will throw the error called insufficient fund. Yes, sir. Insufficient balance or insufficient. If I try to withdraw 2000 now, my current balance is only 1000. If I try to withdraw 2000 rupees from ATM, what will it throw? Insufficient balance or insufficient funds. We'll throw the error called insufficient funds. We have to take care of it, right? Because we should not allow customer to withdraw more amount than his current balance. Now we have to change our trigger again. We have to increase the code of the trigger. Drop this trigger again. Drop this trigger. Drop trigger balance updater. We have to edit the same query, but drop this existing trigger. Drop trigger balance updater. And once again, truncate transaction details table. Database will not delete. All values present in the table will be deleted. Let us think that no transaction occurred up to now. 0 transaction occurred. And set all people current balance to 0. Change current balance of all people. Update current balance to 0 of everyone. Again, we have to write trigger from beginning. In the same trigger, what I will do is, I will try to fetch current balance of the person. I have account ID of the person who did transaction, right? By using account ID, can I fetch his current balance? I have this account ID. Can I print his current balance? Yes. Select current balance from account details. Account details where account ID is equal to variable underscore account ID. I am printing his current balance. I am fetching his current balance. But we should not print current balance in the output. Trigger will not print anything in the output. If we try to execute the same trigger, it will throw the error. That trigger will not return any results here. I want to pass this current balance into some variable. I want to pass this current balance into some variable. For that, what I want to do? I want to declare one more variable with the name of variable underscore current balance. Just to represent that it is variable, I am writing var underscore current balance. You can give some other name also. And I will pass this output into that variable. Select current balance into variable underscore current balance. Now I know his current balance also. Now for crediting, no issue. You can credit any number of amounts. While depositing balance into your bank, there is no limitation. You can credit 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakhs, whatever the amount you want, you can credit. But while debiting, there is some restriction. You can debit any amount which is less than or equal to your current balance. If your current balance is 5,000, you can withdraw any amount which is less than or equal to 5,000. More than 5,000, you cannot withdraw. That's why for credit, if transaction type is credit, we don't have any restriction. You can credit n number of amount. Else means if transaction type is debit, then we have some restrictions. In this else, we have to work on it. Transaction type is debit. Again, in else, we have to write if else conditions. If variable underscore transaction amount, which means transaction amount of that person, particular person, he is debiting some amount, that is variable underscore transaction amount, is less than or equal to variable underscore current balance. If variable underscore transaction amount is less than or equal to variable underscore current balance, if transaction amount is less than or equal to current balance, then if he is trying to withdraw any amount which is less than his transaction amount, less than his current balance, we have to allow him. Normal update query will work. The same update query will work. Otherwise, if transaction amount is less than current balance, then normal we will allow him to debit the amount. If transaction amount is not less than or equal to current balance, which means else, transaction amount is greater than current balance, is less than or equal to current balance, we are accepting him to do debit normally. Else means if transaction amount is greater than current balance, what we have to do? I will update this account details. Update account details, set current balance is equal to current balance. Remove this minus variable underscore transaction. We will keep his current balance as usual. We will not change his current balance. But by using some front-end languages, we will throw the message called invalid or insufficient fund or invalid transaction. Because trigger will not return any results. It will not print anything in the output. It will work only in the backend. It will throw by using some front-end languages, we will print the output called insufficient fund or invalid transaction, whatever it may be. Based on our requirement, we will pass the message. But we will not change his current balance. For example, if your balance is 5,000 rupees and you are trying to withdraw the amount called 10,000, what will that ATM show? It will show that insufficient fund or something. Your transaction is failed. Will they deduct any balance from your bank? Will your balance changes? No, it will not change. Your current balance is equal to current balance. It will stay as it is. But your transaction will not complete. It will throw the error called insufficient. Now, execute this particular trigger. For execution also become difficult. One minute, we did some mistake somewhere. I think we didn't include this delimiter while executing the trigger. Where is the trigger query? Hey, they removed it or what? No. Also include this delimiter and execute. Yeah, it is showing the same error. Yeah, we have to write one more end. If we open if else class again, right? Inside the if else class, we wrote again if else. We have to end that particular. Sorry, I forgot that. Second time we have to end that if else. I forgot this one. Now it is executed successfully. Now again insert into transaction details. Here end if, give one more end if, because we wrote two if else conditions, one inside another. We have to end both the if else conditions. Even after writing second end if. Is it showing any red color into mark in between the query? Where there is some mistake there. You might did some syntax mistake or you didn't end previous query with semicolon. You have to select the query delimiter. You have to not delimiter. 1 minute, let me show you. After that, I will check where they are. Okay, after that, insert value into, after creating trigger, insert value into transaction details table. This is the first transaction. Now I don't have any transaction because I truncated that particular table. First I am inserting credit of 1000 rupees. Unknown column, account ID. I gave again, I did mistake. I did spelling mistake in trigger again. Account ID. Where is this account ID column? I gave account ID somewhere. Let's select query, I think. Yeah, where account ID I gave spelling mistake, account ID. The spelling mistakes will kill us in this bigger queries because we have to check spelling mistake everywhere in the query. Even if there is small spelling mistake, it will not allow. So that I am inserting value into transaction details. I inserted into transaction details. Now I have one transaction in transaction details table. I have one transaction in transaction details table. Account ID, one person created 1000 rupees. If I check his in his account details, 1000 rupees is created, 1000 is added. For account ID 3%, what is the balance? 0. If I try to debit from his account again, what should happen? We will not throw error message. Front end, by using front end language, we will throw error message, but it should not do any changes to current balance. If I execute this, if I execute select star from transaction details, transaction will be recorded that this person tried to do this particular transaction. It will be recorded. But if you check in account details, no changes in current balance because its transaction status will be failed transaction. Like this trigger will work.